All right, let's dive right in. We're tackling one of the biggest, most mind-bending mysteries there is, consciousness. And today we're going to explore a really fascinating and kind of radical new theory that flips the whole thing on its head. It suggests consciousness isn't something we're born with, but something our brains actually learn to do. So let's start with the most basic question of all.
Think about it. Right now, as you're listening to my voice, you're not just some computer processing audio data. You are experiencing it. There's an inner world, a subjective quality to your existence. But why? Why does it feel like anything at all to be alive and be you?
Yeah, that very feeling, that what it's likeness, that's what philosophers and scientists call phenomenal consciousness. And trying to explain how a 3-pound lump of gray matter can produce that inner experience is famously called the hard problem. It is the absolute central puzzle we're trying to figure out.
So, before we can really appreciate this new idea, we've got to quickly set the stage. We need to look at the current scientific landscape, which, let's be honest, is still very much an unsolved mystery.
Right now, there are two main players on the field. First, there's global workspace theory. You can think of this one as fame in the brain. The idea is that information becomes conscious when it gets broadcast across the whole brain, available to everyone, so to speak. Then you have higher order theory. This one is more about knowing that you know. A thought or feeling only becomes conscious when you have another mental state that's aware of the first one. Now the key here is to not think of them as competing, but more like two important pieces of a much bigger puzzle.
And that's where we hit a wall. Because whether it's a global workspace or a higher order system, these are incredibly complex brain structures. They don't just pop into existence, right? So where do they come from? How do they get built? It's a question that's often just kind of glossed over, but it turns out it might be the key to a whole new way of thinking.
And asking that very question, well, it leads us straight to a major shift, a really different perspective on the entire problem.
So, here it is. This is the central claim of this new framework. Consciousness isn't some built-in feature of the brain. It's not an innate property. It's a skill. It's something the brain actually literally learns to do over time.
Now, let that sink in, because this is a huge change in thinking. It means your brain isn't just born conscious. Instead, through a lifetime of continuous, unconscious learning, it slowly gets better and better at generating conscious experience. It learns how to be you.
Okay, so if it's a learned skill, how on earth does that even work? How does a brain learn to be conscious? Let's break down the mechanics of how this incredible process might happen.
The core engine driving this is a process called representational redescription. Yeah, I know, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea itself is actually really powerful. It basically means the brain is constantly and totally unconsciously building little models or descriptions of what it's doing. It's learning about itself from the inside out.
A great way to think about this is the difference between having knowledge in the system versus knowledge being available to the system. For example, the knowledge of how to ride a bike is in your brain and body, you just do it. But that doesn't mean you can explain the physics of it. That knowledge isn't available to your conscious mind. Representational redescription is the process that takes that hidden knowledge and makes it more explicit and available to the brain as a whole.
But here's the kicker. Not just any brain activity can become conscious. For the brain to bother redescribing some piece of information, that information has to be in a kind of Goldilocks zone. It needs to have just the right quality of representation.
So on one end of the spectrum, you have brain signals that are just too weak. Think of a word that flashes on a screen so fast you don't consciously see it. The information hits your brain for sure, but the signal is too fuzzy, too unstable. It never gets a chance to be redescribed, so it stays unconscious.
Now, this is the really wild, counterintuitive part. A signal can also be too strong, or maybe a better word is too automatic. When you become an expert at something, like reading, the process becomes so smooth and efficient that it actually drops out of your conscious awareness. You don't consciously register every single little word like the or of because your brain is just too good at it. It doesn't need to pay attention anymore.
So it seems like consciousness operates in that sweet spot right in the middle. It zeroes in on these intermediate representations, things that are stable enough to be useful but not so automatic that the brain can just run them on autopilot. This is the zone of active learning, where you're grappling with a new, complex skill.
Okay, so this whole learning process isn't just happening randomly. The theory says it's driven by 3 feedback loops that are all deeply tangled up with one another. And what's fueling all of this? At its core, it's about prediction and control.
Your brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly trying to guess the consequences of its own activity, of its actions in the world, and of its interactions with other people, all so it can get better at managing everything. And these are the three engines that make it happen. You have the inner loop, the brain learning about its own internal signals. Then there's the action loop, the brain learning about the physical world by, doing stuff in it. And then, maybe the most important of all, the social loop. The brain learns by watching and interacting with other people. It's by modeling other minds that the brain gets a blueprint for what a mind is in the first place, and then it turns that blueprint back on itself. And they're tangled because they all feed into each other, weaving together this rich, self-organizing model of you.
So, what does this all mean for who we are? If we take this idea seriously, what does it mean to be a conscious creature? Let's zoom out and look at the pretty profound implications here.
Well, according to this theory, consciousness isn't some magical pixie dust. It actually requires a specific recipe. To learn to be conscious, an entity would need 1. Massive computational power to model itself. 2. It'd have to be a non-stop learning and predicting machine. And 3, and this is crucial, it needs to be immersed in a complex social world to get that initial blueprint of what an agent even is.
And that leads us to the final big takeaway. Consciousness isn't some ghost in the machine. In this view, consciousness is the machine's own working theory of itself. It's a practical, down-to-earth, self-generated model that the brain builds from a lifetime of experience. So we'll end with this pretty provocative thought. If being conscious really is a skill that can be learned, and not just some property you're born with, it forces us to ask a really profound question. Who, or maybe what, could learn it next?